For 15 years, Bill Stainton produced the longest running, highest rated, and most award winning regional comedy TV show in the United States, where he won 29 Emmy Awards, thus shattering his dream of winning 30 Emmy Awards. He's also written for HBO, Comedy Central, and The Tonight Show, in addition to being a regular contributor to Seattle Business Magazine. In 2019, he was inducted to the prestigious National Speakers Association Hall of Fame. Bill is also a corporate advisor. He guides leaders and their teams to unleash their natural innovation to future-proof their business and stand out in the industry. He's the author of the Ultimate Team Innovation Kit and, as you saw, the 5 best decisions the Beatles ever made. I have made no secret of the fact that Bill is one of my all-time favorite speakers and people. I am dazzled by his talent, and today he's going to help us get in touch with our own innovation as he presents Unlocking Your Innovation with a 29-time Emmy Award winning speaker. Please join me in welcoming Bill Stainton.
Thank you so much, Fripp, and everybody for the applause. All I can say is, Fripp, you need to aim higher. But yes, today we're going to talk about unlocking your innovation with a 29-time Emmy Award winner. I was fortunate enough to win 29 Emmys. None of them, Pat, are you back yet? I saw your, you had left your desk there for a short time. None of them.
I'm here.
Beg pardon?
Yeah, sorry, needed to grab a quick cup of coffee.
Understood. Yeah, none of those Emmys won at KGW, but I did work at KGW for a couple of years. I remember it fondly. Southwest Jefferson, cool building. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to win 29 Emmys. I produced a TV show in Seattle, Washington called Almost Live. There I am. That's our studio, Studio B at King TV in Seattle, Washington. And during those 15 years when I produced that show, we had to be creative. We had to be innovative every single week on demand, whether we felt like it or not. And so we all learned a thing or two about what innovation really is, what creativity really is. And by the way, during today's session, I'm going to use those two terms, creativity and innovation, pretty much interchangeably. They're not the same thing, but that's getting into the weeds, and we're going to take more of a 30,000-foot look. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. So it was really interesting to me when you waved your hands, because clearly this is a superior group. This is an elite group, because it looked to me like about maybe 60% of you or so were waving your hands to that question that Fripp asked about, do you consider yourself to be a creative person? Because that's not typical. If you take a look at the 2017 Nesta's UK public perception of creativity, by the way, Fripp, UK stands for United Kingdom. Fun fact. You see that here, you can see that 79% of adults consider themselves to not be creative. Which means only 21% of adults feel that they are creative. And those results are pretty much the same year after year. Most people do not consider themselves creative. Not you all, of course, it's the others, but still, they don't consider themselves to be creative. Now, here's the interesting thing to me. I'm not particularly interested in what happens here in this red zone. Not particularly interested in that. But this green zone, I'm not particularly interested in what happens there either. Here's the part that fascinates me. Because see, the real question isn't what happens in the red zone or in the green zone. The real question is what happens here on that line. What happens on that white line? What is it that changes there, that moves someone, a person, a team, a business, an organization, a culture, from that red zone of not creative into the green zone of creative. So that's what we want to talk about now. I want to share with you 3 shifts, let's call them, that happen on that white line and what they mean to you. Because let's face it, there are some people who think that, that wasn't supposed to happen there. There we go. Let me just go back to me. There we go. That's more like it. So many people think that creativity is not for them. And they also wonder, like, why is this important? Being creative, being innovative. Here's why it's important. Here's why it's important to everybody here. Because what is innovation? Innovation is really nothing more than problem solving, creative problem solving. And no matter where you are in your world, in your life, whether you're employed, whether you're retired, whether you're a parent, whether, wherever you are, we all have problems. We all have challenges. And innovation is all about seeing those challenges, seeing what everybody else would call an obstacle and finding the opportunity in an obstacle. And that's what we want to talk about. How does that happen? And why doesn't it happen for more people? So let's start talking about the first shift. Some years ago, a study was done. And in this study, what they wanted to find out was, is there anything that separates the creative people, the innovators, from the non-creative people, the non-innovators? So what they did was they surveyed a bunch of creative types. Now, when I say creative types, what kind of people do you think about? Type in the chat what comes to mind when I say creative types. Let's see what you all go. Artists, Michael. Yep, absolutely. Artists. What else? Designers, perfectly. Art, musicians, artists, actors, writers, playwrights. Exactly. Educators. Love that, Monica. Happy people. That's great. That's a new one to me. Problem solvers. So yes, that's exactly right. Writers, artists, musicians, dancers, comedians, the creative type. And what they did was they asked these people, they surveyed them, and they asked them all kinds of questions. Did you have a pet growing up? Did your parents read to you? Do you play a musical instrument? All kinds of questions. And then they surveyed the non-creative people. Now, who would these people be? Come on, type it into the chat. Computer programs, accountants, sad people, accountants. I'm seeing conservatives, Janelle, CEOs. Yeah, okay. Actually, it's funny. Usually accountants is the #1 answer. In December, I was speaking to a group of about 500 or 600 accountants. And I asked that same question, and they all said, it's us. We know, we suck. We're terrible. Anyhow, so they surveyed the non-creative people, and they asked them the same questions, the exact same questions. And remember, the goal was to see, is there anything that separates the creative people, the innovators, from the non-creative people, the non-innovators? And it turns out there were a number of factors that kind of bubbled up. Things like having a natural curiosity, willingness to take risks, cognitive flexibility. But the #1 factor by far, the key thing, the key shift that happens on that white line is that the creative people believed that they were creative. That's it. That's the big difference. That's the big mindset shift. But can you see how that difference makes all the difference? Can you see how if you believe that you're creative, that's the reality that you'll create for yourselves, right? Because isn't it true? Haven't you found this to be true that so much of our life, so much of our reality is kind of dictated by what we choose to believe about ourselves, right? I mean, we all know people who, for some reason, have chosen to believe that they're not worthy. They're not tall enough. They're not rich enough. They're not smart enough. They're not young enough. They're not old enough. They're not whatever. And once you have that belief, once you choose that belief, and it is a choice. It is a choice, whether we believe that or not. It's a choice that we make. We can choose differently if we want. But once you make that choice, your life goes down a different path. Just like if you choose the more positive attributes, if you believe that you're good looking or popular or talented or confident or creative, your life will take a different trajectory, right? So part of it is that mindset of just believing that you're creative. It's amazing to me that that's the biggest factor. The biggest has nothing to do with IQ, nothing to do with education. It's that belief. So that's the first big shift that happens on that white line. Believing that you're creative, which is one place where the Golden Gate Breakfast Club is in good shape because so many of you waved your hands in front of the camera. So clearly, that belief. So here's one of the next things that happens. See, people have this mistaken idea about what creativity / innovation really is. And this stops a lot of people from even trying. Most people, at least in my experience, have this mistaken belief that creativity is this lightning bolt that comes down from above and only strikes the gifted few, right? You know, it's only the special ones. Here's the secret. Here's what I found out over 15 years of producing my TV show. We are all the gifted few. We all have it. I don't know if any of you remember the movie Amadeus. Did any of you see the movie Amadeus? Or remember how Salieri thought about Mozart? It's like, oh my goodness, where's this music coming from? It's coming from above. You know, Mozart clearly was one of the gifted few, and the music was a gift. We're all the gifted few. And here's one of the different things that happens on that line. Once you stop believing that it's this magic lightning bolt, and you start realizing what creativity really is, then you can start to make that shift. And here's what creativity really is, and innovation. It's really just about connecting dots. Taking two or more things that don't seem to belong together and finding that connection. In comedy, we call it the punchline. In creativity, we call it the iPhone. So it's all about connecting these dots. Okay, so now what are these dots? What are the dots I'm talking about? Well, they can be anything. Every article you read, every conversation you have, every piece of music you listen to, every trip you take, every experience you have, ideas, experiences, people, those are all dots, and we collect them. We collect these dots. Here's kind of what it looks like. Here's a sheet of Avery dots. You all know these dots, these little sticker dots? Yeah. So you get a sheet of Avery dots, and you see there's a lot of dots here, right? This is what happens. You collect dots, you collect experiences, ideas, people, you collect these dots. Once you get a lot of dots, all of a sudden you can start making a lot. Let's go back here. Yeah. Once you start collecting these dots, you can make a lot of connections. And that's a good thing. This right here, this is what it looks like inside the mind of a creative person, a breakthrough thinker, an innovator, right? So it's all about collecting the dots and then connecting the dots. And that's really the key. So that's why it behooves us all to collect as many dots as we can. Because the more dots you connect or you collect, the more connections you can make. We've all had this experience, right? The experience of, you know what? This reminds me of. How many of you have ever said that or thought that? This reminds me of, right? That's what an innovator does. That's what a creative person does. That's all it is. It's easier than most people think. When you say this reminds me of that trip to Italy, or this reminds me of that, great barbecue chicken we had, you're making a connection. Your brain is connecting two dots. That's all it is. When you say, oh, wow, this Billy Joel song sounds the same as the second movement of Beethoven's Pathetique. That's making a connection. By the way, there is a song, it's called This Night. If you look that up with Billy Joel, the chorus of that is the Pathetique Sonata. Now, here's the thing. You have to have both those dots to make that connection. If you've never heard Beethoven's Pathetique, that dot is not available to you. So you can't make that connection, right? So having more dots gives you an advantage because more dots means more connections. But what do you notice about these dots? What do you notice about them? Type into the chat what you notice about these dots. Harriet nailed it. First one out there. Oh, look at this. This is the Golden Gate Breakfast Club right here. Look at that. Yeah. They're equally distributed in the same shape. Okay, excellent. But yeah, same size, same color. They're all alike, aren't they? They're all the same. They're all 3/4 inch navy blue dots. Here's the danger with that. If all of your dots are 3/4 inch navy blue, then all of your connections are going to be 3/4 inch navy blue connections. If all you do is read the same kinds of articles, listen to the same kinds of music, the same newscasts, if you only ever talk to the same kinds of people about the same kinds of thing, you think you're collecting lots of dots, but really, what are you doing? You're pretty much collecting the same dots over and over and over again. You're just collecting more 3/4 inch navy blue dots. And so you connect those, you connect a navy blue dot to a navy blue dot, you get a navy blue dot. But what if your dot collection started to look more like this? Oh, now we're getting somewhere. Now you start connecting these dots, and there's no telling what color your connections, your creative ideas, your innovations might be. A blue dot and a yellow dot, you connect a blue dot and a yellow dot, you get a green idea. So it behooves us to collect different colored dots, colors, sizes, and shapes. Break out of the norm of what you would normally collect and look for those yellow dots, not just the navy blue. Look for the yellow ones, the purple ones, the red ones. Because when you start collecting different colored dots, all of a sudden the connections you can make will be different than anybody else. If you're in business, your competitors, they're all collecting the same navy blue dots that you are. They're all reading the same trade magazines, going to the same conventions, going to the same breakout sessions. They've all got the same navy blue dots. But if all of a sudden you've got that yellow dot that they don't have, you can make a connection that nobody else will have. And when you start to collect enough different colored dots, you start to see patterns that others might miss. You start to see how these things connect. It becomes a matrix. Here's a collection of dots. Now, these dots look kind of random, splotchy. Some are big, some are small, different shapes, different colors. So that's good. It's a collection of dots, but they don't really make much sense. But here's the thing. These dots are actually world famous. This is a world famous piece of art. Millions of people travel each year to see these dots. I see them every single year. I see these dots every single year because these dots live in Chicago in room 201 of the Art Institute of Chicago. And when you pull back a little bit, this is what you see. That's innovation. You connect enough dots and all of a sudden you start to see a pattern. You start to see a picture that others might miss. So just for fun, since at least 60% of you have self-identified as creative, and hopefully that number is going up now, as you see that creativity is not just for the gifted few. We are all the gifted few, and it is actually easier than most people think. Let's make some connections, okay? Can we play a little bit? Is that okay? Can we play? You okay with that? You all right with that? Okay. Here's what I want to try. Here's some words, 6 words. Okay, technically 7 litter boxes, 2 words, but we'll call it 1 word. So let's see. Kirsten, could you unmute yourself for just a second here? And I want you to select one of these words. Just pick one.
Movie.
Okay. Now go ahead and mute yourself. Kirsten has picked movie. All right. And let's go with Bill. Outstanding in your field. Would you select one more? Not movie has been taken. So flight. Okay. Movie and flight. Those are our 2 words. Here's what I want you to do over the next minute or so. Let's just see what happens. I want you to make a connection between movie and flight. You can be as literal or as metaphorical as you want. Make a connection. Your job is to make a connection between them to create a new product or business idea. Something that connects movie and flight. Somehow, if this is a Venn diagram, what's in that intersection that could be a new product or business idea? Movie and flight. Just start typing in. Let's see what you came up with. Don't try and judge yourself. This is all about quantity, not quality. Free floating stories. Interesting. Virtual reality movies when flying. Interesting. Okay. In-flight movies at home. Making lots of money with Tom Cruise. Perfect. In-flight movie. Now, see, look at this. Look at this. In-flight movie industry is moving to grounded pictures in submarines. Oh, that's an interesting take. Take consumers on a flight by getting them into your movie, The Life of Santos Dumont. I would promote the members Golden Gate Breakfast Club on flights by using movies, selling movie popcorn on long flights. Oh, that's intriguing. Selection of movies curated for your trip based on where you are going. Oh, that's cool. I like that. I like that. Movie about running away from it all. Holograms of aircraft. Look at this. Now, how long have we been working on this now? I think it's probably been less than a minute, right? Maybe a minute to a minute and a half. All you had was 2 words, movie and flight. Movies delivered by airplane or drones. Look at this. This is creativity in action. This is all it is. All you had was 2 words, and I gave you a task. Now, there's no real connection between movie and flight. Everything that you're writing here in the chat, you are inventing. You are coming up with just by finding those connections. This is what, right here, this is what creativity feels like. This is what innovation feels like. This is the process. And I'm emphasizing that because I want you to get this sense of muscle memory that, oh, this is it. When I do this activity, and maybe some of you are having this feeling now, when I do this activity with audiences in person, even audiences of accountants, and they start doing things like this, all of a sudden you kind of see the light bulbs going on in their heads, and you know what they're thinking. And people have actually said this to me. Oh, this is innovation? Oh, well, I can do this. See, people think that in order to be an innovator, you have to have an IQ of 1 billion. They think that you have to invent the iPhone. If it's not the iPhone, it doesn't count as innovation. If you're not inventing the new electric vehicle, it doesn't count as innovation. Anytime you make a connection and come up with a creative idea that solves a problem in any way, shape, or form, you are an innovator. You are creative. Innovation is not a private club. Too many people, according to the research, at least 79% of people, again, not here, it's the others, at least 79% of people think that creativity / innovation is a private club to which they are not welcome. That's not a good feeling, is it? To feel like you're on the outside looking in at where the cool kids are. But the good news is creativity, innovation, it's not a private club. It's an open playground. And everybody is welcome, and it's easier than most people think. So collecting and connecting dots is something that starts to happen on that white line, starting to make those connections and starting not just to collect the random dots that you come across, but actively seeking out the yellow dots. Here's something I want you all to do later on today, or at least by tomorrow, if you can't get to it today. I want you to read something that you wouldn't normally read. I want you to listen to a piece of music that you wouldn't normally listen to. If you're really brave and bold, have a conversation with somebody that you wouldn't normally have a conversation with. Start collecting those yellow dots. Start collecting those different ideas. And if you really want to kick this into high gear, think about a challenge that you're facing right now, personally, professionally, wherever. Some kind of challenge that you're facing right now. And as you collect those yellow dots, ask yourself, how can this relate to that? Because see, your brain will try to answer any question you put to it. So if you ask it, oh, I just had an interesting conversation. How can this apply to the problem I'm having with my 17-year-old son? Your brain will start to come up with answers. Now, they aren't all going to be good answers. Most of them will not be, but there might be something. And one thing I will promise you is that they are answers that you wouldn't have come up with had you not collected that yellow dot and asked yourself that question. The key question to ask is, how is this like that? How is this like that? It makes all the difference. In 1440, a fellow named Johannes Gutenberg, seen him here in this actual photo, he noticed two things. He noticed two dots that already existed. The first was a wine press. Now, wine presses existed. They were available to anybody. And I mean, everybody knew about them, a wine press. And he also noticed movable type. He didn't invent either of these two things. Those two things were out there. Those dots already existed. But what did Gutenberg do? He saw wine coming out of a wine press, and it was a dark, kind of a thick red wine. And he thought, that looks kind of like ink. Do you see how ink is now that connection? Ink becomes the center of that Venn diagram. And that made the connection. Ooh, it's kind of like ink. And then he looked at the other dot of movable type. And what did he do? He invented the printing press. He invented it by connecting two things that were available to anybody to connect, but nobody had made that connection. He lived on the white line. He lived in that rare space where you make those kinds of connections. So here's the final thing I want to talk about here. And that is that innovation, creativity can come from anybody. By now, hopefully we've seen that, because it's easier than most people think. Innovation can come from anybody. January 10th, 1987. January 10th, 1987. It's a Saturday. It's a show day for my TV show, Almost Live. And we are pumped because Johnny Depp is going to be our guest tonight on this show, Saturday. But around 11 o'clock in the morning, Johnny Depp gives me a call and he cancels. He has to cancel. It's the day of the show. You know, we tape live in front of a studio audience. They're going to be there in a few hours. And all of a sudden we have this big hole in the show. And so now we're desperate. I call an emergency meeting and we're trying to come up with a guest to interview instead of Johnny Depp. It's got to be somebody local. So we're thinking, oh, you know, what about one of the Seahawks? No, they're out of town. What about that cute new anchor at Como TV? No, she's in rehab, which she was. And then she got fired. But on and on it's going. And meanwhile, the clock's ticking and we're not coming up with anything. When all of a sudden, one of my writers, in fact, it was my lowest paid writer. My lowest paid writer pops his head up and says, oh, I might be able to do something with liquid nitrogen, which is really scary. It's a really scary thought. You know, my lowest paid writer was kind of crazy anyhow, and here he is babbling about liquid nitrogen, but, you know, desperate times call for desperate solutions, desperate whatever, and necessity is a mother. So, you know, we had to say, okay, what are you talking about? By the way, this was my lowest paid writer. His name was Bill. So Bill starts telling us about this liquid nitrogen idea, and you know, we really had no choice. So that, okay, let's put Bill on the air. Keep in mind, this is my lowest paid writer. When he talks about liquid nitrogen, we're all thinking, shut up, Bill. The grown-ups are trying to solve a problem, right? Go back to the little kids table. But that night when we put Bill on the air with his liquid nitrogen, Bill, my lowest paid writer, became Bill Nye, the science guy. Bill Nye, the science guy, who now hangs out with these guys. And on occasion, with this guy, on occasion. But how did that happen? Why did that happen? It happened because Bill Nye was different than we were. We were all writers and producers. Bill Nye was and is a science guy. He saw the world differently than we did. He was the yellow dot. He was the yellow dot. But what else did Bill do? And this is the third thing, the third shift. He asked a different question, didn't he? See, we were all asking, who can we get to interview? Bill Nye was asking, how can we fill the time? Do you see how that shifts the context? How that changes everything? Because the questions we ask about a situation, a problem, a challenge, an opportunity, the questions we ask frame the way we look at that situation. So when Bill and I asked, how can we fill the time? It opened up a whole new set of opportunities, of possibilities that we wouldn't have seen if we still had those blinders on of who can we get as a guest to interview. The answer to who can we get as a guest to interview is almost never liquid nitrogen. But Bill Nye saw that. When you ask a different question, you get a different answer. And if you want to get $1 million answer, you have to ask $1 million question. I'll tell you what I mean. In Seattle, we have a very popular attraction called Pike Place Market. It's a public market. You can go. Anybody ever been to a Pike Place Market in Seattle? Yep. Okay. So you know it. Now in Pike Place Market, there are all kinds of vendors, including a number of fish vendors, seafood vendors. This is one of them called Pike Place Fish. It's one of several. And some years ago, Pike Place Fish was one of 3 seafood vendors in the market, and they were not doing well. As a matter of fact, they were looking at bankruptcy. They just were not doing well. So one day they gathered their team together to talk about this, to have a meeting and try and figure out what to do. And look, their team at this time was maybe 8 people, maybe 10, certainly no more than a dozen people. They just, it was a small fishmongers, basically. But they started asking questions because they're facing bankruptcy. Now, type in the chat what kinds of questions you would expect them to start asking. And maybe you've been in a situation like this with a place you've worked. What kinds of questions might they be asking? What can we do differently? How can we bring large crowds? How can we get more customers? Right. How do we can we raise our prices? Right. Exactly. How can we survive? Basically all versions of how can we make more money, or how can we cut expenses? And other questions like, well, what if we put the salmon on sale every Thursday? Like maybe that would do something. But then one of their staff members, a brand new staff member, literally a 16-year-old guy, asked a different question. Now, look, we can be honest here. We're all friends here. We know that good ideas can never come from a 16-year-old guy, right? I mean, look at us. At least half of us have been 16-year-old guys. I ask you, when you were 16 years old, did you ever have a good idea? I was a 16-year-old guy once. I never had a good idea. A lot of bad ones. But 16-year-old guys, come on. You're not going to get a good idea from this guy, right? But they're facing bankruptcy. It's desperate times. What's the question? He asked $1 million question, a question that changed everything. The question he asked was what if we wanted to become world famous? It's impossible to look at that question with the same kind of thinking as the question of what if we put the salmon on sale every Thursday? How can we make more money? What if we put the salmon on sale every Thursday? Those are red zone questions. This is a white line question. This is $1 million question. It changes everything. Our good friend Albert Einstein once famously said, you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that created it. Now, Einstein also once said, somewhat less famously, does this milk smell funny to you? But that's an entirely different issue. That's not what we're talking about here. Here we're talking about, what if we wanted to become world famous? Do you see how the answers, the possibility of answers to that question are on a whole different level than how can we get more customers? Whole different level. And it worked. They became world famous. If you've been there, you've seen them. They're the guys that throw the fish. That led to an empire, all because a 16-year-old asked a different question, asked $1 million question. So yes, absolutely, you're right. It was Susan. It was a recent hire at McDonald's that came up with the idea of serving fast food breakfast. That's exactly right. The good ideas can come from anybody. That's lesson number one. Lesson number two is ask better questions. Ask a different question. If you want to see your situation differently, ask a different question about it. Which brings us to the most important part of this presentation. I'm going to end with a little bit of a summary, but before we get to that, what questions do you have for me?
Good.
And I'll let
And
whoever's in charge of unmuting do the unmuting and everything.
Okay,
Yes.
we are at the point where, and your question is, and may we keep this for questions without a big setup. So I am going to, just to make it easier for me, let me see if I can, anyway, I can't see any red hat. Oh yes, Kathy, Kathy was our first woman president, Bill. I am not the first woman president.
But you were
So
the first
Kathy,
woman president of NSA, and that certainly counts.
Yes. So Kathy and then Bill Buchanan.
Okay, so I just have to, I jumped in before the question was formulated because I know the line's going to be long. You're amazing. Thank you. But here's what I'm thinking. There's a great deal of change going on in my particular industry right now, which is real estate. And
especially as of 4 days ago.
Yeah. So the fear factor, right? So it's not all human programming. It's like in your face, monster staring. So how do I get people as a leader in the industry to laugh at themselves, move forward, drop the first pretense that this is the end of things? So overcoming fear to get into that.
That's a great question. And there's a lot of fear, especially on the parts of the sellers realtors, because now there's that disclosure thing and you have to prove your value in a way that you never had to before because the rules have changed for realtors. How can we laugh at ourselves? Because when you laugh, it changes the context. I'll give you an idea, an example. We had a bad day at Almost Live one day. I know none of you can relate, but we had a day where just it wasn't any major thing. It was just little things. We were just getting on each other's nerves, right? It was just one of those days. And at the end, as the day's kind of wind to an end, and we're all just miserable and snipping and biting at each other, one of my writers, Nancy Guppy, said, "Oh my gosh, this is just unbearable. How can it get worse?" Well, when you ask that question to a group of comedy writers, you start to get answers. And we started thinking, oh, how can it get worse? And we started tossing out ideas. And the more ideas we tossed out, the more insane and ridiculous they got. The more ridiculous they got, the more we started laughing. And the more we started laughing, the more the whole context in the room changed. It was almost like, fresh air came in and blew the clouds away. We started, because again, when you can laugh at something, because if you're laughing together, it means that you're at the center of a Venn diagram, right? And all of a sudden there's some connection going on there. So that's something that I've actually taught some of my clients to actually ask that question and spend some time with your team saying, oh, how can this get worse? Because comedy and humor is built on conflict, as is drama. No conflict, no story, no drama, no comedy. So when you ask people for conflict, like how can this get worse? They'll start laughing. And Kathy, one thing that I would say to realtors is we've all gone through change. We're all going to go through more change. The realtors who, anytime something like this happens, a change and in your case, this is a cataclysmic, world-changing change that has happened. Anytime something like this happens in any industry, there are going to be those who will take it and thrive. There are businesses that thrived during COVID because they asked a different question. They looked for they said, what's the opportunity here? As opposed to, oh man, how are we going to pay our bills? What's the opportunity here? And which is kind of like saying, what's the yellow dot here? What's the opportunity? So I would encourage you, if you want to start laughing, say, okay, how can this get worse? The rules have been changed. How can this get worse? But then also start looking, what is the opportunity? Because I promise you it's there. There is opportunity. There's opportunity to make yourselves even more valuable to your clients than you've ever been before. But you have to ask that question because, again, remember, your brain will try to answer any question you put to it. So give it a better question, not just, oh, why did this happen to me? Why did I get my realtor license yesterday or last week? Why is this happening? Instead, ask, okay, what's the opportunity?
Yeah, I
A
love
year
that.
from now, there are going to be those who've thrived. Ask yourself, okay, let's time travel to a year. What did they do? What did they do?
I love that. I love my TEDx talk was Dare to be a Better Asker. And I keep forgetting that sometimes I have my own questions all wrapped up. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe go rewatch that.
Thank you.
Great idea, Bill. Good. So now we have Bill Buchanan, then Melissa, then Janice, then Gordon.
Good morning, Bill.
Good morning, William.
I fully endorse your approach to life. Think out of the box, choose different colored dots and that sort of thing. I always have. Not that it's brought me great success, but anyway, I enjoy my life.
That's a great endorsement.
Yeah, right.
I follow your teachings. I'm a failure, but wow.
Within my little world, I'm happy. It works. Every morning I wake when I'm splashing water on my face. I think to myself, I have 80 to 100 billion brain cells. Please help me activate those and choose the ones I need to get through today the best way possible.
Love that.
I say that, and I'm hoping it's helping. Anyway, so I really appreciate your approach to life and your philosophies. But what really fascinates me are the people like Leonardo da Vinci, Wolfgang Amadeus, Mozart, Einstein. I mean, those guys, they didn't go to any of your seminars, but
no, I think you're right.
But but they achieved what they did, scientifically, artistically, whatever, especially Da Vinci artistically. But how? I mean, I think you probably agree that those types of people come along. And is there anything that we can derive from the way they energize their particular skills that will help us normal people in our own lives? Anyway, thanks for a great presentation.
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, first of all, look, they were all geniuses. Now, you don't have to be a genius to be an innovator. It doesn't hurt. But we all know a lot of high IQ people who couldn't innovate their way out of a paper bag because they just, so just because you have a tool, you've got to use it. Here's the one thing they all did. They were all lifelong learners. Now, for Mozart, unfortunately, that was not a terribly long life. He died at age 34, 35, something like that. But they were lifelong learners. Okay, you singled out Da Vinci. Da Vinci, the overriding question in his life was, how does this work? He was curious about everything, about anatomy, about optics, about art, about engineering, about warfare, about, he was curious, and he collected lots of yellow dots. There were lots of people who were like sculptors, and that's what they do. Okay, so Da Vinci did that, but he also painted. He also designed war machines. He also, dissected he was a broad and deep thinker. So it's that sense of curiosity. There are two traits that I found in almost all innovators, and almost all, in fact, in all children under 5 years old. Curiosity. Any of you have ever had a 5-year-old, you know that they're just insatiably, irritatingly curious, and they're problem solvers. They love to solve problems. How can I put these blocks on? In fact, the worst thing a parent can do is go and solve the problem for them. Notice how quickly they lose interest, because it's not about the solution, it's about the solving the problems. Da Vinci maintained that. We all have access to that because we all had it when we were kids. That curiosity and wanting to solve a problem. So anyhow, I'm not sure that really answers your question, but maybe it's at least some insight. If nothing else, it let me babble for a little while.
Okay.
And I know Janelle has a comment here that her raised hand for questions has disappeared. I would say that's operator error. So Fripp, just keep in mind that Janelle has a question also.
Okay. All right. Well, it's Melissa, Janice, Gordon, Janelle.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bill. This has been fabulous. I am a kindred spirit. I do very similar things as you, and I'm super curious about the research on the concept of belief. That's something that I speak about as well, and I wanted to find out about that specific research that you quoted, that you were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that because I don't have that on hand. I will dig it up. And I will find a way to get that to you. Text me or email me or something and remind me, and I'll
let me know when because Melissa's one of our leaders in our chapter.
Okay.
So you send it to me, I'll send it off. Good.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, Janice.
Thank you so much. I had no idea this was a topic, and I took 4 pages of typewritten notes, for whatever that makes you feel. But the idea that I had from listening to you was this. So you may or may not know I talk about burnout, and I give examples of how to push back, how to set a healthy boundary at work. These days, everybody is overwhelmed and overworked. And I usually give little vignettes of situations. I'm overwhelmed and overworked, and now my boss has handed me a new project. What do I say? I usually give the answers. And then I usually say, put this in your own words. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask the audience to tell me what other ideas they have for solving that problem.
Excellent.
And if I have time, I'll even do a breakout with that.
Yeah, excellent. Love that.
So thank you so, so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Janice.
All right, good. So Gordon Hill, I do believe, Gordon, you are the oldest person in this meeting. So we expect a very wise question.
I don't feel that old today, but I am glad to make Janelle feel like a teenage queen. So my question is very simple. I've come to see that every one of us is an original, a singularity. It begins with our DNA, and that we evolve individually. Our challenge is, how do we participate in life as who we are today? That's the first part. The second part is, how do we keep tracking the changes that occur so we can keep changing our mission to be who we really are?
Wow, that's interesting. I'm reminded of on his 70th birthday, wasn't actually on the date, but Mark Twain, there was a party and he was expected to say a few things. And he said something, and I'm going to phrase it very poorly, but he said, it's interesting. You get to a certain age, and back in his day, 70 was a very ripe old age. He said, as you go through life, each day looks pretty much like the day before and the day after. It's like walking up a hill. Each step looks pretty much the same as the step before and the step after. And you don't really notice because you're taking the steps. He said, but every now and then, like when you hit 70 or some miles up, you turn around and you look back over the vista and think, oh, wow, this is my life. This is what I did. When we're in it, we don't notice it because it's just, oh, I guess I'm going to wake up and eat breakfast again today. I did it yesterday. It seemed to work out, so I'll do it again today. But all of a sudden you look back and take stock and go like, wow. So I would say that's one way to be able to appreciate that. I mean, who am I to argue with Mark Twain? But the other thing I would say is keep in mind that thing about that assignment that I gave you all. You all remember the assignment, right? Today or at the very latest tomorrow, read something you wouldn't normally read. Listen to something you wouldn't normally listen to, a piece of music, a podcast. If you're an MSNBC viewer, watch Fox. If you're a Fox viewer, watch MSNBC. Just for a short, just for a little bit, but just, do something you wouldn't normally do. And if you can do that every day, one of the things that I try and do, Gordon, on my decade birthdays, I always try to do something I've never done before. On my 50th, I went skydiving. I mean, it's like, so it's just that constantly. And then on another one, I held a tarantula because I'd never done that. And I did, just keep looking. That's how you keep the mind fresh, by just keep looking, like, what's something different? What's something new? When you're faced with two options of like, should we go to this restaurant or this one? Which is the one that you haven't been to before? Make that choice. You know, like you don't have to do it every single time, but just enough because it keeps life fresh, because there are always new things out there, all new things to explore, new dots to collect.
All right, thank you. You know, I've often said, Bill, there are about 60 restaurants in my neighborhood I could walk to, and I always go to the same 4 or 5. All right, good. Today I go to a different restaurant. So
Excellent.
Janelle Barlow, then Susan Rowan, and I want to ask a question after that.
Okay. I would like to know how I can find more ideas, and I'm thinking about this a lot, to market my latest book, which I am it's close to 500 pages at this point. It's 15 chapters, and I'm producing them as PDF files.
Mm-hmm.
How do I mark? Because I don't think people are writing books like that as separate chapters, PDF files. How do I find ideas? Not the ideas themselves, but to find those ideas to market this new approach to book writing and selling.
Here's what I'd suggest. Don't look at what other book people are doing. There are loads of people, certainly in NSA, loads of book coaches, people who will tell you how to market a book. And look, a lot of that advice is really good. There are a lot of good coaches out there. Here's what I would suggest. If you want different ideas, don't look within the book industry. Look for examples of marketing that you like that have nothing whatsoever to do with books. You know, who's come up with a marketing idea that's really cool? Look at things like, you know, the Marvel universe. How do they market their movies? Look at, you know, fast food places. Look at how, you know, look at how the Harris campaign is marketing. You know, what are some of the cool things that other successful marketers are doing, not having anything to do with books, and then try and connect those dots. Okay, that's a cool idea. That's a cool thing they're marketing. I mean, start to notice that. When you start looking for that, that'll become on your radar. It's like when you buy a new car. All of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, everybody on the highway has this new car. You know, nothing's changed. It's just now on your radar. So start kind of collecting cool marketing ideas from other fields, other arenas, and then start to collect. And again, that question, how can I connect this? How can this, you know, how is this like that? Can I take some cool marketing? Now I'm not saying ignore the advice from the book marketers. They know their business. You do need to know the navy blue dots, but it would also help to collect a few yellow dots from outside and say, is there something here that I can take that can set me apart? Because it's a different color dot. It's a dot that most book marketers don't have. So you can make that connection. Aside from that, I can't help you because I am not a successful book marketer.
Okay.
I am.
All right. So Susan Rowan, Tim Durkin, Colin Hussey.
And the question is, well, I am a successful book marketer, but more than this, Bill, I don't know if you know this, but you have just given the most amazing talk about diversity. Diversity of thinking, the diversity of experiences, diversity of people. I wrote this in 1993 in Secrets of Savvy Networking. If everyone in your life looks like you, was raised where you were, is the same religion, the same race, the same geography, has the same food preferences, which always include deep dish pizza, then you are missing the boat. And I didn't know that word that I used then, diversity, but what you just did is talked about make new friends, go new places. And I can't thank you enough. There's an old saying that if we do the same things we've always done, we end up with the things we always got. So question to you is, what else could I do to make my life better?
Wow. We should probably set up a 1-hour therapy session and then come and see me every week for the next 17 years.
That sounds like a plan.
That sounds like a plan. What else can you do to make your life better? First of all, it sounds like you're doing just fine, Susan. But I would just try new things. I don't know. I mean, obviously the big thing to make your life better, I mean, one of the big things that science has shown us really defines how satisfied we are in life is what's the quality of our relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships with our friends, relationships with our significant others. We are hardwired to be a social animal. We are a pack animal. So, and you know, we found that out during COVID when we couldn't get together, except, you know, in a medium like this. I mean, thank goodness we live in a time where we can actually do this, but still, it's not quite the same thing. So, one of the things you can do to make your life better is have lunch with somebody you haven't seen before. Pick up a phone and call somebody. Call a high school friend you haven't spoken to in 30 years, or in your case, 15 years. But you know, just think about those relationships. Reconnect, connect on a deeper level, connect on a different level. Oh, here's something fun we can do. Try and collect experiences with your relationships. You know, like, oh, let's go, look, there's a ropes course. Let's go do that, because that's something we haven't done before. Let's do it together.
Many years ago, Bill, I gave a speech how to be rich, happy, rich, famous, happy, thin, and get all the romance in your life that you want. And my opening line was, when you count your riches, do you do it in money or memories? And I believe memories is so important. I did notice. I did, in case anyone.
This is a misnomer, because I don't think we've seen the best of Fripp yet.
No, you have not seen the best of Fripp yet.
I love that.
And I want to acknowledge that we've had a lot more people join. Claudette, of course, and Gary McKinsey are members. And of course, Kathy came in late, we've heard from. We've got visitors, Michael from our chapter, and Vivian Cobb and Shannon, thank you. And Marty, thank you for joining us. All right, so now we are, and I must acknowledge it is now almost 9 o'clock. Bill, you have a few more minutes. You can stay with us.
Yeah, I can stay here. I'll skip the summary. The summary is basically believe you are creative, become a dot collector.
Oh, no, you can do that.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, well, no, I can stick around.
So so let's just, no, you can do that as long as you can keep going. All right, so please keep the questions short and specific. Tim, and then we have Tim Durkin and then Colin Hussey.
Tim, thanks for sticking around, by the way.
I know, I thought you were supposed to have your operation. Did you call the doctor and say this is more important?
No, I have to leave in about 15 minutes.
Okay.
Bill, yet another fabulous presentation. Thank you very much. I was raised, by the way, with the dictum, whenever I said I'm bored, my parents said the cure for boredom is curiosity, because there's no cure for curiosity. Bill, I was wondering if you're familiar with, and I think you are because you practice it, the theory by Stephen Johnson, the adjacent possibility. The adjacent possibility is how things like Velcro were invented and Post-it notes. A guy's walking in the field tired of removing burrs from his socks, and he happens to look at the burr and the sock, and thus Velcro came, because Velcro is a burr. The failed adhesive by the 3M guy that didn't work became Post-it notes. So there's a lot of possibility. And when I was the academic director at SMU, we had an instructor that used adjacent possibility as an example for leaders to find solutions. It is all about collecting dots and connecting dots. I was wondering if you were familiar with the adjacent possible.
I am now. In fact, I wrote that down. I mean, obviously, I know the story about burrs and Velcro and Post-its and the Slinky and all kinds of things like that, which were, we call them happy accidents in a way.
And the microwave that melted the chocolate bar in the guy's shirt.
That's right. And that's thinking like a scientist. I always tell people like when you quote unquote fail at something, don't look at it as a failure. It's just a result. It's a result. And the entrepreneur, you know, most entrepreneurs will look at that and go like, well, that fails. I'll never do that again. A scientist, you know, they come up with a hypothesis, they do an experiment, they get a different result. They go, that's interesting. Let's look at this further. That's what happens with, you know, when you get a burr on your sock. Most of us like, but all of a sudden somebody looks down and goes, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that works. There's that curiosity that Leonardo da Vinci had. Oh, I wonder why does this stick? How does this work? What else what's the possibility here? You know, what's you know, when all of a sudden the adhesive, the super glue you're looking for turns out to be very, very weak. Yeah, you could just throw it away because, like, first of all, okay, what can we learn from this? And what's the possibility? Before you throw anything out, any idea out, first ask yourself, what's the possibility? Not, is there a possibility here? Because if you ask, is there a possibility here? Your brain can just say, nope, time for lunch. But if you say, what's the possibility here? Again, your brain will try and answer whatever question you ask it. So ask it a better question. What's the possibility here? Your brain will go, okay, well, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you might come up with something. You might not, but you might. And more importantly, when you start asking your brain questions like that, your brain will start to figure out, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this now. I guess we're turning into a connection machine. Because of neuroplasticity, we know that the brain can form new neural pathways. When you ask questions like that enough, your brain starts to go, oh, okay, apparently this is important to this guy. So, I love that. And I will check out the adjacent possibility, the adjacent possibility. Thank you.
Okay, Colin Hussey, and then our Emmy-winning newscaster Pat will have the last question before the summary.
Fellow KGW
All right, Colin
person.
Hussey.
Okay, well, no, I enjoyed your talk a great deal because I'm starting to think along those lines myself after all these years, you know, having ideas just living in my head. And the thing I've noticed is that, you know, when I've been listening to like YouTubers talk about a certain IP and what's being done to it, like Lord of the Rings, for example, Rings of Power, there's been a lot of complaint about that. But what it did to me was I went, what would I do if I were handed $1 billion budget to depict the second age of Tolkien's Legendarium? And that led to a massive thought experiment, about 200 pages of notes and a treatment. I've got the link to the narration of it. And
okay, and Colin, your question is?
My question is, how do I, it's like getting, how to get some of these ideas to get to where they could take on a life of their own, where other people are like latching on and, you know, I don't feel like that it's all just on me to get something done if it's a good idea. I mean, I've got, like, for example, a potential writing partner for another project.
Okay, and your question is, so we have to, you know, we're already late, so okay.
How to get more attention for these ideas, I guess.
Okay.
That's a marketing question. The first thing you need to do is, with all the ideas, is figure, okay, what are the good ones? You know, what are the ones that are worth focusing on? That's a bigger conversation that we don't really have time for now. But one of the things that you might want to ask is, it just flew out of my mind.
Who wants to play with me?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, we'll take that. That works.
Good. Well, the idea.
But I love the question you asked, Colin. You asked, if I were given $1 billion budget, what would this? Okay, that's the kind of a big, like, what if we want to be world famous? It's that kind of a question unlocks all kinds of things.
Yeah. I always like to start with, if the world were perfect, what would it look like? It's not, but that don't want to limit your thinking. Nice. So you don't have $1 billion, but what if you did? Something would be workable. Thank you. And now, Pat, over to you. Thank you so much, Tracy, for inviting a celebrity Emmy winner. Thank you for attending and hanging through to the bitter end. We're expecting a great question from you.
That's right. Oh my gosh. I see that Emmy in your background. I thought I saw 2 back there.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks for noticing. Thank you for having me. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it. Bill, with your drive and passion, intelligence, creativity, I wonder if you have any thoughts on how to make local newscasts more interesting, entertaining, relevant, etc.
Wow, that's a big question. And I mean, things have changed so much in news since I worked in television. I never worked in news. But here's one thing that hasn't changed. News is still all about telling a story, right? I mean, depends on. So I think you can ask the question, how can I tell a more compelling story? There's a great book, I have it here someplace, by Chip and Dan Heath called Made to Stick, which is every storyteller, every speaker should have this on their bookshelf. It's about how to make your ideas stick. Now, they wrote it for college professors and people like that, but it's great. So I think ultimately the crux of how to make a newscast better and more compelling is how to tell a more compelling story, whether that's on broadcast news, whether that's on, on Shorts or YouTube or LinkedIn or, or tweeting, live tweeting or something like that. It's still about the story. I don't know. I feel like I should be giving some kind of a much better answer here. But I don't really have anything off the top of my head. Sorry.
That's okay. It's a little bit off topic, so I apologize for that.
You are close, and aren't you close enough that you could go have a cup of coffee?
Yeah, we can meet in Chehalis.
I would love that, Bill. I would really love that.
All right, good.
Cool.
And Pat, I don't know, we are very lucky. Susan Rowan is a great program chair, and we have with us a couple of great speakers who are going to be with us very soon. Susan, next week for our guests. You're very welcome to come in 2 weeks' time. Susan, who's with us, is going to talk about travel with my aunts, about dementia, and then we have Rachel, who is going to be a fabulous speaker on cryptocurrency, and then of course there she is, our friend Harriet is here, and her program is on transforming stress and just really how to live a healthier life. And with that, Pat, Susan Rowan would not forgive me if I didn't say perhaps sometime next year, because we're booked up for the rest of the year, you'd like to come give us a talk. And really, it can be an interview, it can be a talk, but just about your career and how it's changed and how you got into it. Our group really loves human interest stories. So if you'd consider it, and I'm sure Tracy Hooper would encourage you. So anytime, we're not putting you on the spot, but if you'd like to, Tracy will put Susan and me in touch with you.
Yeah, I'm flattered for the offer. Thank you. And thank you, Tracy.
Good. And with that, Bill, obviously we've had a big crowd, and it's always good when they're hanging around and not going to their next appointment. So with that, thank you very much, and please give us your summary, and if you want to give us another tiny little story about Almost Live, that would be fun.
Okay, I'll give you the summary, and then I'll close with one quick little story. So the summary, again, just like the little recap of what we've been talking about here. Let's see. Trying to get this to change. There we go. So the things, number one, believe you are creative, because you are. We are all the gifted few. That's step number one. Number two, become a dot collector and a dot connector. And don't forget those yellow dots. Don't just keep collecting the same dot over and over and over again. Collect the different dots and then connect them. Number three, ask, how is this like that? That's that curiosity part. How is this like this? How can I connect this to something that's important in my life right now? And the last one, to get $1 million result, ask $1 million question, which is really just about ask different questions. All right, so I'll leave you with this. Among the people that we had a chance to work with, there was a guy named Seinfeld. He had a TV show. Some of you may have heard of him. Jerry Seinfeld. He was on our show 4 times, and we were lucky to get him, especially the 4th time, because for the 4th time he was on our show, his TV show was already, going through the roof. So we were lucky to get him. And he did a routine for us that I'd seen him do before in the clubs. It's a routine about how your washing machine is like a nightclub for your clothes. And, you know, you put your clothes in, you put the soap in, you press go, and ooh, things start happening and all that. And you're not allowed to know about it, though, because like underwear is, you know, getting together with your socks. And there's a, and when you open the lid to check on things, they all go, no, nothing to see here. Anyhow, you can see it on YouTube. But he did that routine for us, stuff to do sitting down. It's a very physical routine. He did it for us, and somehow I'd seen him do it in the clubs, but it was better. Somehow it was better when he did it for us. And I asked him after the show, I said, did you change something, Jerry? Did you do something different? He said, yeah, here's what happened. He said, I had a gig a couple of months ago and I had it videotaped, which was kind of new back then. And I was watching the videotape. I was watching myself and I realized I'm kind of boring. I mean, physically, I'm kind of boring. I mean, I'm just standing there telling jokes. Now the jokes are good. The jokes are working, but physically it's just kind of, you know, visually just kind of boring. So I started thinking, is there anything I can do to make it different? Is there anything I can do to make it a little more visual or a little more active? Is there anything I can do to make it better? Now, this is Jerry Seinfeld we're talking about. This is a guy who at the time was the #1, the top comedian in the country, if not in the world. He was making millions of dollars a year. He was selling out clubs and theaters all over the country. His TV show was heading into the stratosphere, and that routine was already working. It was already killing in the nightclubs. And Jerry Seinfeld was still trying to make it better. If that's not a lesson for all of us, I don't know what is. Look, this is the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. All of you, you're already killing it in the nightclubs. It's easy to coast when you're already killing it. The hard thing, the challenge, is when you're already killing it to keep trying to make it better. And that's what Golden Gate Breakfast Club's all about.
Well, thank you. And Bill, it's wonderful guests like you and wonderful future guests who come see how we run the meetings that make the Golden Gate Breakfast Club so much fun. I owe you big time. I'll see if I can get you another Paycon in the future. All right. Thank you, Bill Stainton. One more hand. Thank you.
Buddy.
We invite you all to come to our next virtual meeting. If you're in San Francisco, we hope to see you at breakfast. Thank you, Pete, Carl, and Janice, for your behind the scenes work. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone. We will see you soon.